Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And today I want to talk about two very specific things that I think are so good in DC20, and honestly two of the things that might just carry the system to be one of the top ones, one of the top contenders. And that's going to be the way that attributes work. That's going to be the prime modifier rule. Now, I'm going to go ahead and lay this out, okay? When I'm talking about this, in all of the systems that I know really well, I haven't seen these rules or these methods set out in the same way, okay? There might be things similar. I don't need the comment section to be like, actually, this system created in 1983 by this guy that no one has ever played in their lives ever uses this rule, so you're dumb. I ain't seen it. I'm sorry, okay? Let's hop into it. So before we hop into our deep dive, let's go over the kind of basics of our things we're talking about, the attributes and prime modifier. As for your attributes, there are 4 of them. You have might and agility, which are your 2 physical. As you can see, there's no inherent constitution. It's kind of thrown in there, but we'll talk about that later. And then for your 2 mentals, you have intelligence and charisma. Again, for those of you that are from D&D, as that's one of the more popular ones, there's no wisdom. Okay, these are your 2 and 2. They're split. We're going to talk about what they do. And then finally, the prime modifier rule. What that is whatever your highest stat is. Doesn't matter which of the 4 it is. That will become your prime modifier, and your prime modifier is what helps you with things like attack checks, spell checks, your save DCs, and then your awareness checks as well. Again, we're gonna go over that. Some of you might be a little worried. We're gonna discuss it, okay? Now, as for the attributes, right, that's what we're going to talk about first, so you get a lay of that land, so you understand how a character kind of functions in this system. One thing I really like about this system is it's done a very good job of having each of the 4 stats be important for its own reason. When you're playing something like D&D and you're creating your character, you're always going to have a dump stat. And in this system, it's no different in the sense of that you're going to have your minus on something. But for a lot of characters, like let's say you're playing a pretty like generic, you know, giant barbarian, right? Just like a big boy, rawr, we love that, okay? The thing is, on a character like that, you can kind of just dump something like intelligence and not really feel that bad about it. Like, you might miss out on some skill checks and not be great, but it's not the end of the world. Whereas in this system, every single stat is important for its own reason. We're going to discuss that. And whenever you have a minus in a stat, you feel it, which it sounds bad because it's like no one wants to be inherently bad at a thing. But if characters were all good at everything, it wouldn't be a very fun game because characters wouldn't feel special or unique. So I think this does a fantastic job at helping both of those, of whatever stat you're using feels very important in just about any aspect. It has its reason to be there. And then also whatever your minus stat is, you're going to notice, right? And again, some of you might take that as a bad thing, but I think overall, as far as fun gameplay goes, it's good for that. So, first one we're going to talk about, your first physical thing, that is going to be your might attribute. Alright, this does a couple of things. Okay, one, it does a lot of things that your strength inherently did in something like D&D. So, things like grapple checks, right, things to move you, a lot of that's going to be might based. And then whenever it comes to the might, it helps with a few other things. So things like heavy armor, a lot of times are going to have a might restriction because, you know, if your character isn't mighty enough, it's going to be pretty hard to carry around a big chunk of heavy armor, right? And then also on top of all of that, one of the biggest thing is might helps with your health points, okay? So that's going to be kind of its special thing that it does, is it feeds into your health points. It also helps with rest points, just little added bonus. But anyway, important to note, health points, right? That's its special unique feature. Now for our other physical attribute, we're going to have agility, and agility helps with a lot of things that something like Dex would help with. One thing it does that I really like is it helps with your jumping and your ability to fall and take less damage or fall from greater heights, things of that nature, which I think is a very fun. It's a niche thing, but if it comes up, it makes you feel cool, right? It makes your character feel special. And then one of the biggest things is, kind of like it does in D&D, adds to your, what is in this game, physical defense, which inherently is your AC, right? It's the likelihood of something that is a physical effect hurting you, whether that be a sword coming out of you, or even certain spells, right? If a spell's more of a physical effect, then it's going to use that physical defense to protect you. Now, onto our mental attributes. Obviously, this one's not going to be a super, like, crazy thing. We know what charisma does, okay? Charisma helps you in a lot of your social situations. Its unique feature, so to speak, is that it gives you grip points, which are something that can help you out in combat. I'm not going to go super in-depth on what grip points are right now, but inherently they can help you or even help your teammates, give them advantage on saves, or it can help you take less damage, things like that. So again, as you can see, our kind of like intelligence-based creatures might still have some ways to counteract some of that lack in physicality. It's not going to be as good as just a buff to your health points, but still usable and still helpful. And then both of our mental attributes, so I'll mention this again when we get to intelligence, but for charisma, it helps with your mystical defense, which is really just like your AC against things that affect like your soul and mind, okay? So it's kind of like physical defense, but in a lot of situations, it's going to be a little more niche use case. And now our fourth and final attribute, and that's going to be intelligence. Intelligence, quite simply, does what you'd imagine it does, helps with a lot of intelligence skills, helps with your mystical defense like I talked about, and intelligence's kind of special thing that makes it fun to put into is that it helps you with your other skills. So you will get additional skill points based off what your intelligence modifier is. So that's really nice. If you want to be like that skill junkie kind of character, logically you would want to go into intelligence because your character is just inherently smart, so they're going to be able to learn and function and do more things at a higher level than most other characters would be able to. Now, before we jump into the numbers and kind of how the standard array and all of that works, one thing I do want to mention for all of these different attributes is that if you have a negative in one of these attributes, which with a level 1 character you almost assuredly will, you kind of have to understand you go negative in those things. So for something like might, if you have a -2 might, you're gonna have -2 hit points, okay? If you are, your intelligence is kind of what you're choosing to dump and you have a -2 in it, which -2 is the lowest that a stat can be, you will have 2 less skill points to use, okay? And that goes for all 4 attributes. So important to note when creating a character, and this is why I talked about earlier, how it helps your character feel much more unique and much more special, and like they're really good at what they do. They can't just be this all-rounder. They can be, but you'd really be lacking in a lot of areas, which, that's how it is, master of none, good at all, whatever the phrase is. So, something to keep in mind, if something is negative, whatever that like kind of special, unique thing is that it adds, it will also subtract. So, as for the attribute points and how they work, one, the system is so streamlined. I love it. I don't know why D&D hasn't like made changes to this already. Like really, this should have been something done, I think, when 5th edition was released, but whatever. Instead of it being like this kind of arbitrary number, like if, for example, you have 18 strength, so then therefore you have a +4 modifier, whatever your number is your modifier, right? So if you have a 3 in might, you get a +3 on any kind of might check. If you have a -2 in agility, you have a -2 for all of your agility checks, right? It's pretty straightforward. Now, there's going to be skills and things that will add other bonuses. It's not just stuck to that, right? It's like any real tabletop RPG system. But as far as that goes, your pluses are your pluses, your minuses are your minuses, your number's your number, which is good. Now, how do we allocate those points when creating a character? Well, there are 3 kind of main ways to do it. 2, I think, are fine. One of them I highly recommend against, and that's going to be the way they do rolling for stats here. I think it's even worse than how D&D usually is. I highly recommend against rolling for stats, but some people love it, so, do what makes you happy. Now, the standard array is going to be +3, +1, 0, -2. So again, that's just allocating these where you want. You might want +3 strength, 0 agility, +1 charisma, and then -2 on your intelligence, right? Something like that. Move those how you want, but that is the standard array for this game. Hey, what's going on, you silly little geese? Okay, so I goofed. I mean, I didn't goof because I'm inherently perfect, right? But this is post-editing, Blzane, and I just want to let you know that for standard array, you also get 2 bonus points that you can allocate how you see fit to create the character that you desire. So, for example, if you use standard array where you put your points into 3, 1, 0, -2, you can have 3, 1, 0, 0, you can have 3, 2, 1, -2, you can have 3, 3, 0, -2, right? Like you can allocate however you want. You still have to follow the like cap rule where you can only have a max of +3, but just wanted to put that out there for those of you astute mathematicians. You may have realized point buy inherently gives you more, but that's not the case because I forgot the +2 points that you get to customize your character farther. Anyway, let's go back. And you know what? If you made it this far, why not subscribe to the guy? I'll see you later. The other system is a point buy system, which I know you min-maxers are probably excited to hear this, right? Always gets your brain going. inherently the way the point buy system works in this one is you will have -2 in all of your stats, because that's the lowest, that's where they start, and then you have 12 points to allocate where you want. That being said, I know some of you are already thinking in your brain, oh my gosh, we can have a +10 might as a level 1 character? No, you cannot. Okay, it's not an option. Sorry, unfortunately, it's not something you can actually do. The way it works in this system is that you have a prime modifier cap, or basically you can't have an ability score be higher, or an attribute score, whatever, be higher than whatever that cap is. So whenever you're level 1, it's +3, which is why I keep using that. Once you hit level 5, the cap moves up to +4. Once you hit level 10, it moves up to +5, 15, 6, 27, right? Hey, again, following that rule of 5s, we love that. So it's one of those things where your character will gradually get better at that special thing, but as you level up, certain levels do give you points to allocate to these different attributes. So don't worry, you're not like only going up +1 every 5 levels. You'll get some as you go. It's just your main one can only jump up past that maximum once your level has hit that to actually raise the cap for it. So don't worry about like some ridiculous min-max human having like a +10 might check. It's against the rules, frankly. And finally, the last thing you can do is rolling. I would really, really recommend against it, especially in this system. I already think rolling kind of proves some problems because oh so often will you run into one person rolling even sometimes just slightly above average, and then one person rolling slightly below average, but that gap only widens when one goes this way on the average and one goes this way, and it just creates a really big chasm of this person's character just feels bad, and this person's character feels awesome. So I would really, really recommend avoiding that. But if you are really set on rolling for your stats, the way it works is you roll a 1d6 -3. Again, this is important because your stats can go down to -2. That's the point. So 1d6 -3. You're going to do that 4 times and then allocate those numbers wherever you want on your system, right? And then after you do all that, you get a +2 bonus to put into whichever stat you want. However, even with rolling for stats, you cannot go over +3. That is a level cap rule. You can't change that. So, you might want to put that +2 somewhere else. The one thing is they have something called prime modifier insurance if you do the rolling system, in which if you roll for all your things and you still don't have a +3, even after adding that +2 to something, then you can lower a stat by 1 and raise another stat up by 1, or even by 2 if you're still that far away. So it is an option. It is something you can do. Again, just in terms of like table management and making sure everyone's having an equal good time, I'd kind of recommend against rolling for stats. Now, I finally get to discuss what is genuinely my favorite rule in the entire system, and that is the prime modifier rule. So, as I've talked about, your prime modifier is whatever your highest stat is, and it is capped, so you can't make your prime modifier like absolutely redonkulous on level 1. And your prime modifier, as I discussed earlier, is what decides your attacks, your spells checks, your save DCs, and your awareness checks. Those are kind of the 4 main things that your prime modifier affects. And the whole intention of this is that you can put your points into whatever attribute you want and make your character whatever attribute you want and still have them be effective in combat, which is so nice, because far too often in plenty of other systems, you end up trying to create a character that you kind of have in your brain is very fun. So let's use the example of the Muscle Wizard, which is a bit of a meme in most tabletop RPG communities, but the Muscle Wizard, right? This real buff wizard that gets his power from his muscles. Well, in a lot of your normal systems, it just won't function because your spells will scale off of something like your intelligence or your wisdom or your charisma. And so if you try to dump a bunch of points into strength and all of those stats go down, well, sure, you're strong, but now the main thing that you can do is worse, and that just doesn't feel good. It doesn't ever feel right. But now you can have your dream where you can put your +3 in might, and you can be this beefed up guy. And it can be one of those things where you've just trained your muscles so hard that simply by flexing them, you can cast spells. I'm not going to be able to find the exact message, but to give a funny example of this, Someone in the DC20 chat actually talks about how one of his PCs, because they recently did a one-shot with DC20 to kind of test the system out, created a character that was either a sorcerer or wizard, something like that. But they basically had a bunch of henna and like tattoo markings on their body, and because they were so high in might, they would flex their muscles in certain ways to connect the different tattoos and lines to cast different spells. Come on, you can't tell me that's not some of the like funniest character creation ever. Bro is sitting on the battlefield like, oh, fireball? And there's like fireballs are spitting out of these like mystical tattoos on him. Like, that's so sick. So I think this Prime Modifier rule is amazing. Now, I saw some comments in my original DC20 video. Not all of you like it. Not all of you like the idea of, especially one of the ones y'all gave, which, you know what? Maybe actually I just need to show you how a charismatic swordsman might fight. Oh yes, it is I, the charismatic swordsman. Look, an elephant! Now, frankly, if that didn't sell you on the charismatic swordsman, then I don't think anything will, okay? But all jokes aside, if it's something that really worries you and something that does concern you, then simply don't do it. You know, like, I don't want to be that guy, but the whole point of the Prime Modifier is that you can make any kind of character you want. So if you want only strength-based warriors, build a strength-based warrior? Just an idea. Indubitably yes, okay? Now, I'm not trying to be rude about it, but I just think it's a little silly to be upset at a system that only grows creativity, and you can still, like, follow the basics, right? Like, you can have an intelligence-based wizard, a charismatic bard. Like, you can do all the normal stuff, sure. For those of us that want to trick people that there's an elephant behind them and then stab them, we should be allowed to do so. So, final thoughts, kind of 3 biggest points. The attribute system has been streamlined in an absolute amazing way and does a really good job of making you feel like you're actually missing out on an attribute rather than just dumping a stat you don't care about. My second point is basically the vice versa of that. Of whatever stat you do dive into, it feels a lot more important and a lot more special for your character. It's, you know, that's a little subjective, I suppose. But the last thing I want to talk about, kind of my final point and what we just discussed, so, you know, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but the Prime Modifier rule just helps creativity overall. And again, if it's something that bothers you in the sense of, like, you know, a charismatic sword fighter just doesn't make sense to you, you can even still just think about it as like, well, yeah, it's like the handsome prince who's practiced with his sword a lot and is really good at it. It just happens to be that he is extremely charismatic. So, like, you know, he can be good at both. But anyway, to leave it all alone, those are my final thoughts. I think that part of the system is amazing, just like many other parts of the system. I can't wait for the next update. And once that update comes, I'm going to start dropping some kind of class-specific things to talk about. I'm waiting on that because we don't have subclasses yet, but once it comes, ooh, are we gonna get into it. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I can't wait to see you all on the next one. Peace out.